Good morning, everybody. I keep finding more and more reasons why I'm all in on silver, and it just comes down to, I think, a sense of logic, understanding that things that cannot go on forever won't. It also has to do with the grand scale of the Ponzi scheme. I've showed many times this demonocracy.info of Exeter's pyramid showing quadrillions of dollars worth of debt-based generational Ponzi scheme assets piled on top of each other, and the world is, just awash in it. And when you start to look at how teeny tiny, vital, historical, eternal the silver market is, you can't help but to get all in on silver like I have. I've read a couple articles talking about the amount of paper silver, these contracts, these 5,000 ounce paper contracts that are loaded onto the market and that they use to suppress the price of physical silver, which I'm all for and taking advantage of, because if they didn't have this paper silver instruments, silver would be worth more than gold, and I probably couldn't stack as much as I could. But in the meanwhile, now, while this system is still functioning, it is a fantastic time to be buying at silver at pretty much any price. And I'm going to get into a big reason why, not necessarily in the terms of what we've covered with the collapse of the dollar, but really to show you the amount of energy that these banksters are using in their paper contracts to short, to suppress, to drive out investment into the ultimate nemesis of the banking system, which is silver. Now, back in 2014, there was talk about changing the silver fix and gold fix. And if you don't know, for well over 100 years, a bunch of British bankers, namely founded by the Rothschilds and their ilk, every twice a day, every business day, physically set the price of silver because they control the market. To me, I don't understand how this isn't blatant monopolistic price fixing, but it's existed for hundreds of years, and that's the so. But when they went to go change it to a digital format, which it really doesn't matter if it's a phone call or a computer that does it, doesn't matter. In the Bloomberg article, it mentions that silver is a $5 trillion market. And I know from my own experience that there's probably 860 million ounces of silver, times $16, $18, $20, somewhere around there, that it's, and it's about, anywhere from 16 to $20 billion, amount of silver that's mined every year. How could they possibly come up with $5 trillion? It really starts blowing your mind. And I think that this is a time where people really have to understand the difference between billions and trillions. And probably the easiest way to conceptualize the enormity of difference is that a million seconds is only 12 days ago. A billion seconds is 31 years ago. But a trillion seconds is 31,688 years ago. And we're talking about a $16 billion annually mined amount of silver, and yet there's $5 trillion worth of paper silver that is traded on top of this teeny tiny market. So that was the article from Bloomberg, basically talking about the absolute insane amount of paper contracts that are traded on top of the paper silver price. And all of it has been shown to be a suppression. In fact, there was a Deutsche Bank smoking gun proof that there's massive rigging and fraud in the silver market when they got caught. And they provided transcripts from the 2011 time, basically when silver was rocketing up. It was reaching its nominal all-time high of $50. And JP Morgan and HSBC and UBS and apparently Deutsche Bank all came in and shorted the market. They put an unlimited amount of paper shorts into the market and drove the price down, just, totally destroyed all the longs in the market. And they profit off of it. And they have transcripts talking about how they own the silver market, that they are the silver market, and that that they're going to blow through all the stops that they that they can see. That's the other thing. They own and control the game, but they also get to see what the other side, the longs, have, because they're the banks that run it. So there's no fair way of beating them inside their game. The paper suppression market is not going to end anytime soon. But boy, when it does, and you realize the amount of money that they had thrown in it just to keep the price down, it's like holding one of those beach balls underneath the pool. Like, at some point, it's just going to rocket up because you can't hold it down anymore. It's just another small example. Forget about the money that's diverted from and chasing after real estate, flip this house, and cryptocurrencies and stocks and latest IPOs like Snapchat and all these other things. Forget about that money that's flowing away from physical silver and gold to a lesser extent. But think about also the added pressure that is added on to suppress the price of silver. And then this Bloomberg article mentions that it was $5 trillion worth of notional paper silver that's traded on a yearly basis, on top of an estimated $16 billion worth of physical silver that comes out of the ground every year. Now, one of my favorite silver writers, Steve St. Angelo at SRS Rocco, recently did another take on the paper versus physical and the amazing amount of leverage in the silver market. And he goes on to show in a couple of these charts the amount of money that is spent in silver investment. Now, you realize the majority of the silver that is mined is only used as a commodity, in cell phones and socks and, wiring and all this stuff, solar panels, medicine. It's mainly used as a commodity. But Steve broke out what is actually being invested in. So he took the physical bar investment, official coins and metals, and then the ETF build. I don't know if he includes privately minted stuff like mine, which is probably really hard to quantify. But he estimates that of the 880 million ounces that are mined every year, roughly a quarter of that, or 250 million ounces, are being invested in. It's not being used up in consumption and eventually thrown away in huge trash piles throughout the world. It's being put into a form that will last, essentially for eternity. And the ETF numbers is a little suspect, but we'll go with it. He estimates that of this $16 billion worth of silver that's mined every year, only $4.4 billion of it is actually going into coins, bars, stuff that we invest in. And so he goes on to extrapolate this a little bit over the past 5 years, that if it's roughly about $4 to $6 billion worth of silver that's actually invested into the total amount that he estimates is $32 billion over the past 5 years of investable silver that's been that we're investing in. And compared to just the amount of central bank investment, which they're creating money out of nowhere, that the central banks have bought trillions of dollars worth of financial assets during that same time period. And again, the difference between a billion seconds is 31 years ago, and the difference between a trillion seconds is 31,688 years ago. This is, again, another mind-blowing amount of paper investment that's just flown all over the world, and how very little has been put into silver, and on top of it, how much is being used to short this teeny tiny market. And if it wasn't such a nemesis of the banking system, and it has historical ramifications, back the crime of 1873, when we had a bimetallic gold and silver standard, the British Zionist Rothschild bankers petitioned to get silver demonetized, forcing the average worker to lose the value of its silver and force them to use gold, which all the the bankers owned all the gold. They did not own all the silver. The same British bankers demonetized silver in India, causing huge amount of poverty there. During the Opium Wars in China, the British were horribly depleted of silver, which was money back then, and forced to use, and they could not trade with the Chinese because they didn't want the British finished goods, and they had such a huge trade deficit with them that they ended up importing opium into China, and thus causing two, essentially 20-year wars with China over silver, the lack of it. And that's where it came from. Silver is the only antidote to this debt and death paradigm, which is why I've been working so hard on creating this. So Steve St. Angelo has two other really great charts in here. He breaks out the amount of silver that's exchange traded, these paper contracts, the physical amount of ounces that it represents, even though it'll never actually, create these ounces. But this is what they're physically trading in ounces versus the total global mining supply of silver. And I've mentioned before that the total amount of silver supplied on any given year is about 880 million ounces, or just under a billion ounces worth of silver. But Steve goes on to show that just under a billion ounce physical silver market has on top of it 159 billion ounces of paper silver traded on top of it. Essentially making it 159 times more paper silver traded than there are physical ounces underneath it. And you have to recognize that not every ounce that's mined goes through these exchanges, which makes it far worse. And that, even the silver that is traded, a lot of it is or very few of it, probably about a quarter of it, is only going into silver coins and bars and stuff that's actually being invested in. The rest of it's really being consumed. But here's where we get the really mind-blowing numbers when Steve adds up all this notional trading value of all these silver contracts that have been traded just over a year versus the amount of physical ounces that are invested in, like what you and I do. So he estimates that only $4.4 billion worth of silver goes into coins and bars and in the ETF. And yet, these bankers are spending so much time and energy that it's he estimates $2.2 trillion worth of paper silver that's on top of this $4.4 billion investment that we're doing. So I'd like to find out what Steve thinks about this, because the Bloomberg article mentions that even though his number is astronomical, the Bloomberg article is saying that it's actually $5 trillion. So it's really $5 trillion worth of paper silver that's being traded against us with our $4.4 billion worth of silver investment. Things that cannot go on forever won't. And when you realize that the amount of the ratio between the amount of paper that's being traded and the physical investment that we're doing, he estimates that it's at 517 to 1. So they have 517, essentially a fake monster box worth of silver versus every one physical ounce that we're doing. So if people want to know why I'm so passionate about silver, is because I know the history of it. I know the math of it. I know how much leverage that they have on top of it. I know how eternal it is. I know how messed up the entire global system is. I get all this stuff. And at some point it will end, and it will be the single largest transfer of wealth you'll ever see. The value of an ounce of silver will be far greater than anything that you can picture today. So while you're thinking about, tipping your toe into silver, realize that there's less than 1/10 of an ounce of silver for every man, woman, and child on Earth today. Realize that there's only about 1 billion ounces of silver in the world above ground, and yet there's 6 billion ounces worth of gold available. That silver is 6 times more rare than gold above ground, and yet it's trading at such a discount to gold, it's ridiculous. Besides the fact that it's useful and vital and eternal, it's the second most versatile commodity on Earth next to oil. That there's only about 8 billion arable acres of land in the world. That the ratio between an acre of land versus silver is so much in favor of silver. You start to understand why I'm all in on silver. And the best way I found in investing in silver is dollar cost averaging. It's easy for a lot of people. They start watching these videos and they go, oh my God, he's right. I'm going to go sell the house and dump it all in, and we're going to go all in on silver. I don't recommend you do what I did, because when I found out about this, I literally sold my house. My wife was 7 months pregnant with our first child. We rented for the next 4 years, and we got out of the housing bubble in 2005 to 2008, and went all in on silver. Literally bet the house on it. I don't recommend you do that. It is not the prudent thing to do, because I ended up with a lot of silver that I just wasn't happy with. I bought 100-ounce bars. But what I've been doing and what I found over the past 12 years, that the best way of investing in silver is dollar cost averaging every week. Pay yourself in silver. Measure your wealth in ounces. Stop looking at a little screen somewhere saying, oh, I'm wealthy because I have these amount of digits on the screen. It all goes away when it's most important. I've been there, I've done that, and yet the ounces that I stack will be around for my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and probably far beyond that. That's what real, tangible, eternal, generational wealth is. So every week I'm coming out with a new mini mintage BU design for people to stack on a weekly cost averaging basis. This week it is our lesser evil. That the lesser of two evils is still evil. All last year I talked about how I don't care who's president. The system is so far gone, so rigged. Debt and death will rule the world. And I think people now see with Trump, who spoke against Saudi Arabia, saying that they caused 9/11, now is signing some $350 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia, and then flying to Israel and warmongering against Iran, which I told you that they're going to try to cause a false flag against, and get us involved into another war that does not benefit us but does benefit the debt and death system. But this week we have our lesser evil 1 ounce BU. It is available for as little as $2 over spot. It will only be made this week. It is a part of the Wizards of Us series that I started last year, and it comes with a unique certificate of authenticity, showing that it is part of the series. And you can see from this chart, every week that we do this, we release it, we're selling them for $2 to $3 over spot, and yet immediately on eBay, they're almost doubling in value. And even if it didn't double in value, the fact is that there is no other silver out there that you can buy that has a consistent track record of outperforming what we're doing here on a weekly basis. And we're going to keep doing this. I have the whole year all planned. I have new designs every week. It makes silver stacking fun, exciting, profitable. Some people are flipping it, taking older issues, waiting for the price to go up, sell it onto the aftermarket, and then stacking maybe 2 ounces of the next new one, waiting a couple weeks, waiting for the profits to go up, and flipping it and selling the next one and go buying that again. Other people are doing the proof product, which I have on the Silvershield group. But right now, I think it's just an absolute no-brainer. If you see the value of silver, you got to get silver. And if you see the value of Silvershield, you got to get Silvershield. Thanks, everybody, for your support, and keep stacking. Thank you.